This week on a special episode of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon, or as we like to refer to it as the Big Show, we celebrate, arguably, if you look at my background, one of the greatest American movies of all time, Francis Ford Coppola's Magnum Opus, The Godfather. Charles Kirkland and I will discuss this great American classic. And we'll have all that and more on episode 496 of Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. Let's go. All right, and welcome to latest episode, Keeping It Real with FilmGordon. I am Tim Gordon. I am joined by the exuberant Charles Kirkland Jr. Charles, how you doing, man?
Every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in.
Hey, man. So truth be told, before we even get started today, celebrating the 50th anniversary of The Godfather, which was released on March 24th, 1972. This is a film that is near and dear to my heart. We will spend a significant amount of time today talking about this film, and not necessarily just the movie itself, because people have seen the movie. I want to talk about all the backstory, all the intrigue, all of the stuff that was behind the scenes that helped propel Francis Ford Coppola to creating, arguably the work that when one day he closes his eyes for the last time, the first thing on his obituary is going to be, he created The Godfather and Godfather 2 and that franchise, along with Apocalypse Now, Conversation, and some other films. But Francis Ford Coppola, man, his legend is secure in Hollywood, specifically for the movie that's on my back right here, The Godfather. Charles Kirkland, I know how much you enjoy this film, and I'm saying that tongue in cheek, because Charles is like, are we gonna really spend a whole hour talking about The Godfather? And the answer was yes. We are gonna spend an hour talking about this film because this movie is important, and over the next hour, you will see why. But before we get to talking about The Godfather, there's another thing that's happening this weekend that people are getting really excited for that I'm like, yeah, okay. This little thing called the Oscars is happening. Now, normally what we would do, and we've done this every year, is I would invite in buddies of mine like Russell Williams III, two-time Oscar winner, and only one of four African Americans to have won multiple competitive Oscars. Somebody like Kevin Wilmot, who won an Oscar several years ago for co-writing Black Klansman. We got a couple, I think there are like 3 or 4 other people who are close to this show who are Oscar winners. So typically we would have invited those people on. Charles Kirkland also knows that every year for the Academy Awards, I, along with another colleague of mine, Travis Hobson, we usually host the big Oscar party at the Arlington Cinema and Draft House. And Charles, give them a plug really quickly, because I want to make sure that they know that I'm talking about this event that's happening Sunday night.
Well, the event is like you said, it's our Oscars party put on by the Washington, D.C. Film Society, who we also raise funds for the Film Fest DC, which happens in film festival that happens in DC. But we do the Oscar party every year. It's the first time actually we've done it in 2 years, because we took off for COVID last year. Doors open at 6:30 at the Arlington Cinema and Draft House. Tickets are $20. You just come in, you can sit down and watch these guys make fun of the Oscars as we talk about Oscars and Oscars trivia. There's auctions, silent auctions. There's all kinds of good fun. There's a predict the winners contest that we run. It's a lot of fun, and we do it every year. We start watching the red carpet at 7 o'clock, roll right into the Oscars, and when we roll out about 12:30, 1 o'clock in the morning, we've all had a lot of food and fun, and it's just a great time. So we're happy to be able to do it again, and anyone who wants to join us, come on out and join us.
So I'm going to do something on this show today that, as a rule, I don't do until we get to Oscar night, because people always go, well, how do those critics always know the movies that are going to win? Yeah, it's pretty simple. Actually, because all you got to do is watch all the other guild shows that lead into it, and you sort of get a sense. So I will just start by saying, in what we call the big six, which is actor, actress, supporting actor, actress, director, and film, right? So if you got a pool, write this down right now, because this is what Tim is telling you what his predictions are, right? So let's start with best supporting actor. Charles, help me with this one. I think what we've seen throughout the last run, whether it was CCA, DGA, SAG, PGA, and all these other shows, who's been taking home best supporting actor?
It's been over the all over the place, actually.
No, it has not been. Troy Kotzer from Coda is probably the guy who I've seen win, because I know he swept last week at the BAFTAs, the CCAs, and the was it Screen Actors Guild? Was that the same weekend?
Yeah, Screen Actors.
Yeah, okay. So Troy Kotzer from Coda is probably your even money to take that one home. For best supporting actress, Ariana DeBose seems like she's got the wind on her back right now. I like Ingenue Ellis, but Ariana DeBose is probably going to get the Oscar on Sunday night. We get the best actor, look for Will Smith. And if Will Smith gets upset, it'll be Benedict Cumberbatch from Power of the Dog. Will Smith, of course, from King Richard.
You don't think Denzel could sneak in there? Denzel's been getting some. No, okay, never mind.
Anyway, Charles is just trying to tease you. I'm giving you a serious segment because I told you to write this down at home. And best actress this year, I'm trying to think who has been getting, because there's usually a pattern of how this stuff happens. Who won best actress last week at the CCA? Because the person that won it at the CCAs won it at all three shows, I think. Really, Charles, you can't help me with this, man. Best actress.
Was it Olivia Colman? No, because Kristen Stewart has won some, Olivia Colman's won some. So, I don't think this one's as much a consensus.
So you don't think this is a slam dunk like the rest of them? Because Will Smith, Troy Kotzer, and Ariana DeBose, absolutely in those categories. And I want to make sure, I'm going to try to find a gold derby real quick, because this is one of the times that I wish I had a Wilson on. Wilson or Clayton Davis or one of these other guys would let me know in real time what they're thinking. Hold on a second. We're still looking at best actress right now and who's got the even money on actress. Okay. Ooh. Yeah, you're right. Best actress is kind of all over the place. Jessica Chastain right now is the leader in the Clubhouse, closely followed by Olivia Colman and Kristen Stewart. If it were my pick, Olivia Colman just won several years ago, and I can't remember what that film was called, with her, Rachel Weisz, the movie where she played like the disturbed queen. The Favorite. Thank you. So she just won a couple of years ago. Jessica Chastain. I'm going to say Jessica Chastain. That's going to be my choice. I didn't necessarily like Kristen Stewart and Spencer. Yeah, she was the best thing in it, but she wouldn't get my vote. All right, so now that takes me down to director and picture, and this ought to be pretty simple. Unless her speech turned off a lot of voters last Sunday, 2 Sundays ago, Jane Campion should make history as the first woman director to win 2 Oscars. Now, she didn't win her first Oscar for directing. She won her first Oscar for the piano for writing the screenplay. But she'll be getting her first Oscar as a director from that branch. And I don't really see anybody that's even a close second to Jane Campion right now. There's nobody else that's getting that kind of love and attention. And if Jane Campion doesn't have an Oscar in her hand Sunday night, something has gone terribly wrong.
and this would also be the first year ever that we had a woman back-to-back win.
Back-to-back. It took 94 years for a woman to go back-to-back at the Oscars.
Not the same woman, but
not the same woman.
Yeah.
2 women. And then finally for Best Picture, as much as it pains me to say it, I love Belfast a lot. I just think that the Power of the Dog clearly looks like the movie, unless there's an upset. The only thing that I think that could knock Power the Dog out is that if there's a late surge for Coda, because Coda has been picking up steam. It really has. It is peaking at the right time. Coda could make noise. I have no comments on Coda or on Power the Dog. I'm just the messenger. Do not. I voted in my guilds, and neither of those films I voted for them. So I'm just being real, and they know because they called us, Charles, to ask us what we were voting on. Didn't vote for your movies. But Power the Dog is probably going to win the Oscar, which if it does, Netflix will win their first Oscar, and they've wanted it bad. They've been wanting it for like the last several years from Roma. They were out there pushing the Trial of Chicago 7. They've been pushing, trying to win an Oscar, a Best Picture Oscar. So this might be the year for Netflix. So there are your picks. So one more time, in case you came in late. Best Supporting Actor, Troy Kotsur. Best Supporting Actress, we look at as Ariana DeBose. Best Actor, Will Smith. If he wins, he'll take home his first Oscar, and he will become the 5th African-American male to win an Oscar. Am I correct? Sidney Poitier, Denzel Washington, Jamie Foxx, Forrest Whitaker.
Do you really count Sidney Poitier as African American?
He'll be the 5th Black person to win. My goodness, man, really?
I'm just saying
because the 5th Black person to win Best Actor. It doesn't happen a lot. There's only been one Black woman.
We could be celebrating the first African American Black man to win an Oscar 40 years ago. Right now, I mean, Officer and Gentleman. That was dang. Now I can't think of his name.
That was supporting actor, and we win supporting actor a lot. We don't win Best Actor or Best Actress a lot.
That was the first time we won Best Supporting.
Yes, Louis Gossett Jr. won for Officer and a Gentleman. That was 40 years ago, 1982.
Okay.
You wanted to get that out, man. It is not a. It's like, okay. I mean, it happens so few of the time. That's why it is a big deal when we talk about it on the show. So that is my Oscar kind of preview. The other thing that I'll be anxious to see on Sunday is that I was reading this morning that the Academy or ABC has sold out all their spots. So they're really excited, thinking that we're going to get a lot of interest. Oscar numbers have cratered over the last 5 years. I mean, cratered. I think they had like 10 million people watch this show last year. And if I'm wrong, let me see, because I just saw a piece last week about how the Oscar numbers had been in decline. And they're hoping by adding Regina Hall, Amy Schumer, and Wanda Sykes, that's going to somewhat turn it around. The show is produced by Will Packer. They got Beyonce performing on the Courts of Compton, singing her Oscar-nominated song. I don't know, man. There's been the furor over the last couple of weeks about the 8 categories that they're taking out of the show, and everybody is like, you need to acknowledge these people. I said it then, I'll say it again. The show is too long. Nobody wants to sit and watch a 3.5-hour Oscar show. They don't. And take it from a man, you just heard Charles say earlier, I'm hosting a 3.5-hour Oscar show. I'm like, dude, I've run out of material like an hour and a half ago. You need more trivia? Man, this show is long. So the Oscars are too. You remember several years ago when they had the politician who was running for office in New York, and his platform was the rent is too damn high. Yep. The show is too damn long. Shorten the Oscars, man. My goodness. So again, like I said, so that's kind of my thoughts on the Academy Awards. Charles, you got anything, man, on the Oscars, man? The first time they'll be back. I know they're going to a reduced setting. The films are good this year. I don't think they're great. The host might be good. They're not great. That remains to be seen. All the pomp and circumstance around the granddaddy of award shows. What say you, bro?
you know, after 2 years of having no host, and now we're going to have these 3 hosts, and I don't know what the common denominator other than that they're women, because you got 2 comedians, one white, one black, and then a serious actress. I mean, I can't say that Regina Hall can't do comedy, because she did a little of that in her latest movie, Honk for Jesus, Save Your Soul. But I mean, I don't know where this is going, how it's going to play out. You know, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting night. That's all I can say.
Okay, so Charles, that is for you, because Charles is like, we're gonna do this whole show on the Godfather. We're gonna talk about the Oscars. We have. Is there anything else about the Oscars that we should bring up? We talked about the commercials.
We could also talk about the 45th anniversary of Roots, which we let go by and never spoke about.
We can't. Oh, okay. See, this is the exploding head. Why would you even bring up an anniversary of something else if we're doing an anniversary show now? This is like the anniversary of this. That would be like me saying, we talking about the Oscars, and I go, yeah, that's cool, but the Grammys are coming up. The week after that. Wow. Okay. When we get to, I guess the anniversary of Roots happened early in this year, right? That was January. Yeah, that happened during Sunday. So sorry. So, for Charles Kirkland's purpose, that was a Charles dig. No, but Roots is very significant. It is the 45th anniversary of it this year. And let's just say that might come up again at some point later in the year for something else. Just have to stay tuned. All right, so now let us transition and pivot over to The Godfather. And as I said earlier, this crime drama, this really influential crime drama, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. He co-wrote the screenplay with Mario Puzo, who was the author of the original book from 1969. And I'll just say a line in here that we adapt books today or stories today and bring them to the screen. But, 50 years ago, that was literally how Hollywood made a lot of their movies, Charles, that, throughout the golden era that they would have doing, when I call it the golden era, when they had the studio system. For people young who are watching me don't understand what I'm saying. The studio system was a system years ago of how Hollywood was set up that, unlike today when everybody's free agents and, you're an actor and you can go and work for this studio and take this production and have your own production company and do this, that, and the other. Back in the day, they didn't have any of that. So you signed a contract to Warner Brothers, you signed a contract to Universal, you signed a contract to whoever, and you were bound by that studio. And you had to work on projects that the studio would have. They had in-house writers, so they would hire writers. They would adapt books, and they would bring the books into the studio. They would have their writer write it. They'd have their in-house directors. They'd have their in-house stars. Everything was in-house, right? So when The Godfather came along, this was kind of the dismantling of the studio system, but Hollywood was still doing business as usual, where they were taking books, adapting them, and doing that. Now, the movie The Godfather, they bought the option for the movie while he was writing the book. Right. Did you know that? So when Mario Puzo announced he was doing the book, Paramount bought the rights to the book before the book was complete. So by the time the book is complete, it sells 9 million copies. It sits on the New York Times bestseller list for 67 straight weeks. Just a smash book. Now, the other history that we need to talk about with the Godfather is that pre-Godfather in 1972, this was really the first film of its kind made with actors of Italian descent, right? Italian-American descent, right? Or Italian descent. The last movie Paramount did, Charles, and I don't know if you know this, was a film called The Brotherhood that starred Kirk Douglas, and it was an abysmal failure for Paramount. And at the time, Bob Evans, who famously had a documentary years ago called The Kid Stays in the Picture, fascinating documentary about this guy who was an actor who later goes to Paramount. And during the time that he's there, several classic movies are made. The Steve McQueen film Bullet, A Love Story with Ryan O'Neal and his then wife, Ally McGraw. And then, of course, The Godfather, right? So Robert Evans was like, you know, the success or the tanking of the Brotherhood. He said, we need to find, you know, an Italian American. We need to find somebody of this culture that can make this film. Hire Italian actors, because Hollywood would always hire non-Italian actors and wonder why the mob movies didn't work, or they didn't feel real or authentic, right? So they looked around and went through a bunch of different directors, Charles, a bunch of different people. They offered this movie to Otto Preminger. They offered it to, you know, this one, that one. Sergio Leone, who they offered it to first, basically was like, no, I'm good. I'm working on my own kind of, you know, mafia movie called Once Upon a Time in America, which would not come out for another 12 years to 1984, but it's absolutely a classic, right? So a man by the name of Peter Bart. Do you remember who Peter Bart was, Charles?
No.
Peter Bart was a senior writer at Variety magazine for years, but before Peter Bart worked at Variety, he was the assistant to, wait for it, Robert Evans at Paramount. And it was Peter Bart who suggested, you know what, there's this guy that just did a movie. It didn't really do well, but he's an up and coming guy. His name is Francis Ford Coppola. They brought Coppola in, and, you know, the drama that ensued, you know, because again, like I told you at the beginning, we're not gonna really spend a lot of time talking about The Godfather. Everybody knows The Godfather. They know what it is. Charles, you gave me the look, like you don't know what it is?
Well, I've never heard of it. Duh. All
right. I'm gonna let Charles do what he does. But so needless to say, as we talk about this movie, let me just kind of go through this cast, because a lot of these guys outside of the first name I'm going to mention were all young and upcoming. And the guy who's at the top, who was the lead, was thought to be at the time washed up. You know, he had been nominated and won Oscars, or won an Oscar in the 50s. And by the time they got to the early 70s, nobody was working with this actor. He had become very difficult, and he was somebody who, you know, people were like, oh man, he's, as they say now, he's washed. But the film starred Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Richard Castellano, Robert Duvall, Sterling Hayden, John Marley, Richard Conte, and Diane Keaton. Now, I noticed they didn't put Talia Shire in there.
I was going to say, what happened to Talia Shire?
Yeah, Talia Shire's in there as well. It was the first installment, of course, of the Godfather trilogy. 2 years later, that movie, which I think is slightly superior to the original, also won Best Picture, probably making it the first franchise in Hollywood history to ever have both its first two installments win Best Picture. Now, the story in the original spanned from 1945 to 1955 and chronicled the Corleone family, or the Corleone family, under Patriarch Vito Corleone, played by Marlon Brando, focusing on the transformation of the youngest son, Michael Corleone, Al Pacino, from reluctant family outsider to ruthless mafia boss. Now, we talk about this movie and we talk about this structure. This structure has been seen in so many movies, man. I call it the King Lear Shakespearean structure, right? You have the king, he's got three sons. Akira Kurosawa did a movie in 1985 called Ron. Same sort of story. We need to divide the kingdom up. I got these three sons. Francis Ford Coppola takes this format, used it here. The older son is the hothead. It's Sonny Corleone, played by James Caan. The middle son is played by, what is his name? John Cazale, Fredo. And of course, the youngest son is Michael, right? So the structure of the story is that Sonny is the heir to the throne. He's a successor to his father, but he's a hothead, right? Very mean, quick temper, right? His middle brother, Fredo, as they would say on the streets, is not really built for this. Fredo is kind of soft and sensitive, and he's not a leader of any kind. And then, of course, there's Michael, who's a college student who understands what the family does, but they have high hopes for him. They want him to either be a senator, they want him to be a titan of corporate America, and he's in the military as the film starts. And soon, of course, there's tragedy because the father is shot. The older brother is gunned down and killed. The younger brother is sent out to the West Coast because, he has to get his act together, and there's nobody left to carry on the Corleone family business except this young guy who wants nothing to do with the business, who gets caught in the crossfire, and then turns out to be the man his father wanted for his other sons, didn't necessarily want it for him, but he falls into this spell, and this just kind of embraces this life. And it's almost like there are a couple of things that happen because what makes The Godfather such a great movie, Charles, and I was talking a little bit about this with you this morning, is that you can take 10 people, right? And you can give them the format and the outline of the same story and just let them go out and look at the different types of execution that people put into a story, and you get 10 entirely different stories. Sometimes it's skill, sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's things falling into place the way they should be. Sometimes it's all three of these things that happen. I think The Godfather is simply one of these films that so many things went right behind the scenes, and then the choices that Coppola makes in front of the camera, and this group of really, really talented actors. Because what's funny is that if you look at the cast of this film, all these guys now are established as heavyweight actors. But when you started this film, Marlon Brando, who I would argue is probably the greatest actor that we've ever had. I mean, you can, I know the English talk about Olivier, and you got other folks, but Marlon Brando in the modern era, everybody's doing Brando, whether it's Denzel Washington, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, everybody, you even look at even younger actors, the Ed Nortons. All these guys are doing a variation of what Marlon Brando perfected with method acting in the early 1950s in films like Streetcar Named Desire, On the Waterfront, and so many other things that Marlon Brando was great at. And what's great about him here in this film, Charles, is that, as I said earlier, by 1972, Brando was considered somebody, they didn't even want Brando to even screen test. So the way that Coppola got around that is that he had to disguise Brando. He stuck cotton balls in his mouth. He greased his hair down with shoe polish. I mean, all the stuff I'm telling you, you can read it for yourself. This is real stuff. And because they didn't even recognize it was Marlon Brando, kind of as this pit bull, Vito Corleone. Right. So as I said, there were so many things that happened, Charles, behind the scenes. All of the different people that they tested for all these different roles. Like one of the other stories that I heard and saw in another documentary, and I'm not sure if it was Brian De Palma talking about this or if it was George Lucas, but what a lot of people don't know is in the 1970s, there was this group of young renegade filmmakers who all became friends and would hang out from time to time. And among that group were people like Steven Spielberg, George Lucas, Martin Scorsese, Francis Ford Coppola, and Brian De Palma. So the five of these guys were hanging out, right, as they are revolutionizing and changing the motion picture industry during that time, right? And as the story goes, when they were having auditions for The Godfather, Lucas at the same time was about to start casting for his film, American Graffiti. So there were people, and later on it would be like when Spielberg was doing Jaws and they were shooting Carrie, they would all sit down and they would see the same people and be like, right, okay, I know you over here, you go over that room and test for that. So Harrison Ford and others were were testing for all of these different roles. It was a crazy time, but it worked out well for all these directors, right? So I know when he was screen testing this film, he was showing it to people like Spielberg, and he was showing it to Lucas and all of these guys. But that whole story, as I'm unspooling it now, was just hellish on what he went through to make this movie. So I talked to
you. One of the things you were talking about, Marlon Brando not being working at the same time, that same year, Laurence Olivier was coming back too, and he had made a movie, Sleuth, and they were both facing off against each other in the Best Actor category that year for Oscar. So it was kind of like the meeting of the masters, as you want to say, but where Olivier was in Sleuth, which was this comedic entry, Marlon Brando had this heavyweight role that he played in The Godfather, and I believe Michael Caine was also in that group at that same time. All of them going for that Best Actor category, Oscar at that time. But because of the gravity of the role that he played as the Godfather in that movie, he just outshined everyone.
Right. Now, the other thing, Charles, and you're absolutely correct. The other thing that's interesting about this is that is legendary stories about how unhappy Paramount was with Francis Ford Coppola. You know, he had made a small little movie, and I can't remember the name of it. It's The Rain something. I forget what it was. But he didn't have a lot of experience and a lot of clout, right?
You're talking about Coppola.
It's Francis Ford Coppola.
Yeah, yeah.
And but what he did, which was really smart, is that they offered him The Godfather from the original book. And he didn't like that at all. He thought it was sleazy. And he was like, no, I'm not really trying to do that. And then he went and thought about it again and decided to tell the story of America through this immigrant family. And he made it a family. I know it sounds stupid to say, but he made it a family film. And not just a family film on the screen, but a family film behind the screen. His father helped with the score. His sister is cast in the film. And in a pivotal scene, in the baptism scene, his daughter, Sofia Coppola, is in it. It's a lot of stuff that went into this film, man. And I remember watching the documentary, The Kid Stays in the Picture, where Bob Evans said that when they were making The Godfather, he said he wanted it to smell. You could smell the spaghetti sauce. It needed to be that Italian, and boy, was it that Italian. It's just an amazing thing, and I'm trying to go through some of the highlights, right, for this movie. The original screenplay, from what I'm reading, was 173 pages, man, and they cut it down to 163. Paramount said it was 40 pages longer than what they wanted. They wanted a 2-hour movie, man. He makes this epic, right? The whole thing, like I said, there was so much drama behind the scenes that Coppola thought that, like, within the first couple of weeks, that they wanted to fire him. And he kind of went back because there were some people who were angling to get him fired. And he went and talked to Bob Evans at Paramount, who gave him permission to get rid of him. And he godfathered those people out of there. He made them an offer they couldn't refuse, and they were off the film. You had, in the casting, which I talked about a little earlier, in his mind, in Francis Ford Coppola's mind, the only person that could play Vito Corleone was Marlon Brando. And of course, as I told you, the studios didn't want Brando at all. They wanted Laurence Olivier, to what your point was. Olivier's agent refused the role, claiming that Olivier was sick, but he went and did Sleuth, despite the fact that he was sick.
Right.
The studio pushed for Ernest Borgnine. They wanted George C. Scott, Richard Conte, Anthony Quinn, or Orson Welles to play him. I think Francis Ford Coppola was right with Brando, man.
I think Orson Welles was an interesting pick. It might have worked decently, but none of them would have compared to Marlon Brando.
Yeah, and then the other thing, Charles, it wasn't just that role. It was every role, whether it was Michael, Tom Hagen, every role, you had all these people that they kept saying, we want you to do this, we want this guy, we want that guy. And Coppola was like, no, I need Duvall, I need Khan. I mean, it's nutty thinking about it now, but this was a different age of filmmaking. Like today, you don't really see a lot of that, Charles. You know, you see folks that get attached. Like there's a guy, it gets announced in the trades that this guy is attached to this guy is attached. We're adding these actors, but nothing along the drama of how it was a half a century ago when studios versus their own directors, they would be like, no, you don't want that guy in the movie. We don't want this guy in the movie. It's just nutty, man. It's a great change, but I'm glad that we're having this conversation because this is a part of not just the salute of this film, but the kind of architecture and the background and all of the mystery that went in behind the scenes that we didn't find out until years later what had transpired with The Godfather. I left that space for Charles, who didn't say anything.
A lot of that, you know, where you have to give credit to Francis Ford for having the vision, because a lot of these people, you know, Duvall, Pacino, they weren't big names. They weren't like the big stars that the studio wanted to sign on behind either as they were picking them. So as he was assembling this cast that turned out to be a cast of all stars, they weren't at that time. And so, you know, it was the great vision that he had in getting all these people together and putting them in each perfect place for them to embody roles that become classic for now for eternity.
So the other thing that's interesting is Gordon Willis, who died several years ago, was the cinematographer for Godfather. And much like Coppola, he was offered the job and turned it down because he thought that the whole film was just going to be too chaotic, right? And he came back and he said, I'll take the job, but only under one condition, that I don't want to use any modern filming devices, helicopters or zoom lenses. I want to shoot it and make it look like it's a painting. So when you watch The Godfather now, think about the kind of background and what it looks like. And I was telling Charles the story that a month ago, I was really, really giddy because they had a limited run. And despite the fact that I've seen this movie more times than I care to remember, one thing was always the one thread that I never saw it the way it was intended to be shown on the big screen. And when they showed it on the big screen, I went in there, you know, bought my ticket, sat there. I was like giddy because it was funny because I knew the film, I knew the lines. I just wanted to see the scope of it. And it's a much different movie watching it in the theater than it is watching it at home, Charles. It just is.
Okay. You know, the funny thing about it, you talk about the cinematography, it wasn't even nominated for cinematography for the Oscar. And there were two films, well, maybe three, that were big at that time when the Oscars came around. That was Smooth, Sounder, and Cabaret were right there with Godfather. And Cabaret took a lot of awards that you know that the Godfather didn't get, as far as the director from Cabaret won over a couple of you know, best supporting actor was Joel Grey from Cabaret. So Liza Minnelli won the best actress in a leading role for Cabaret. So Cabaret was a big film at the time that this film came out, and edged out The Godfather in a couple categories where you were like, oh, this should have been. But the surprising thing, like I was saying, was that it wasn't even nominated for best cinematography. Right. So that was just crazy back then.
Yeah, man, it's just so much stuff, man. They talked about the film was shown to Paramount staff and exhibitors in late December 71, January 72, as they were trying to figure out what they had. The world premiere, of course, took place in New York City on March the 14th in 1972. It would come out 10 days later throughout the rest of the country. And at the time, with a record, It sold the TV rights for $10 million in 72. $10 million, and they were showing it over 2 nights. The theatrical version of Godfather debuted on American network television, NBC, with minor edits. The first half aired on November 16th, 1974, the second and 2 nights later. Now, Charles, let's just talk about a change here, right? Now we live in an age, a movie comes out in March, you can get it on DVD, in like the end of April, early May, and you can watch it at home. Man, it took 2 years for The Godfather to get on television 50 years ago. 2 years before it came on TV.
Not strange for back then. I mean, the technology was different. You didn't have all the networks that you have now. You had the major 3, and they had all their programming. So, a movie, you could go to Blockbuster and get it maybe in about a couple months.
Not in 1972, you couldn't.
Oh no, not in 1972. In 1982, you could. But 1972, you still, you didn't even have Blockbuster back then. So it was like you had to, if you didn't see it at the theaters, and also theater runs were a lot longer too. So you'd have a movie that's playing for 9 months or longer in the theaters versus where nowadays it's 90 days and it's on DVD or on TV.
Right. All right. So, and it's funny you talk about that, because the last movie I could think of in our time that played like that was probably Titanic. I remember Titanic being in the movie theaters for like 9 or 10 months. I couldn't believe it at the time. I was like, this thing is still playing? Wow. But let's get back to The Godfather. The Godfather, when it was released, was a blockbuster, right? Now think about this, Charles. This is a movie that's a drama. There's not a lot of, and when I say action, I'm sure it's, of course, people are getting shot and things, but there's no CG, there's no superheroes, there's none of this stuff. And at the time, it broke box office records 50 years ago. It was the highest grossing film of 1972. The film's opening day gross was $57,000, with prices, remember this, prices were increased from $3 in 1972 to $3.50. Go see The Godfather, $3.50 for The Godfather, but I only got $6. You short, man. You can't need another dollar. Prices in New York, listen to this, Charles. Prices in New York for The Godfather in 72 increased further to $4. And number of showings increased from 4 times a day to 7 times a day. The film grossed $61,000 in Toronto its opening weekend, $240,000 in New York City. The film grossed $450. Wow. So it was the fastest film after 18 weeks at #1 in the United States. The film had grossed $101 million, the fastest film to reach that milestone. Now, again, remember, people at home watching, when you hear $101 million, you're like, man, that ain't nothing. $101 million when you selling tickets at $3 and $4 a ticket.
And in 1972.
Yeah, man, that is not saying much. It was the first film to gross $100 million in North America. Well, they said it's actually not, because The Sound of Music came out in 1965, but it remained #1 in the US for another 5 weeks. Total of 23 weeks, Charles, at #1. Let me say that again. The Godfather was the #1 movie in America for 23 weeks. Do the math, Charles. What's that? 5, almost 6 months was #1. Every week, Godfather, #1. It earned $81 million in theatrical release in US and Canada during its initial release, increasing to 85.7 during its reissue in 73. It eventually made it. It's been re-released 8 more times since 1997, grossing anywhere between $250 to $291 million in worldwide box office grosses, making it among one of the top 25 highest grossing films of all time today. Now, also, Charles, which I think you love this, since we now live in the age of Rotten Tomatoes, there's 133 reviews of The Godfather on Rotten Tomatoes right now. Would you want to take a guess on what the approval rating is for Godfather in 2022?
100%.
Close. 97.
Wow.
97%. It is absolutely fantastic. It was nominated for 7 Golden Globe Awards.
Look, I make a lot of jokes. About The Godfather, but who out there really is dissing on The Godfather? I mean, 97%.
What is these 3%? That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Who's this 3%? I mean, what's going on with them? I just don't understand. I don't understand.
Bruh. So The Godfather, it's absolutely amazing. So I'm looking at the Academy Awards. It won 3 Oscars. It was nominated for, it would have been nominated for Outstanding Original Dramatic Score, but it got revoked. I don't know what that means, but I'd have to do some research. But it was nominated for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 3, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3. It was nominated for 10 Oscars and it won 3. Yeah. So I don't know, man. So here we go again. It's number 3 for the top 100 movies from 98. In 2001, when they did it again, it fell to number 11. I'm going to make them an offer you can't refuse. It's the number 2 quote of all time. It's the number 1 gangster film of all time, and with reason, because we're going to get to that in a second. So Charles, before we get out of here, man, let's talk about the cultural influence and legacy of what The Godfather meant. And before I even read anything, it's easy to see that Martin Scorsese, who was a friend of Francis Ford Coppola, Brian De Palma, who was a friend of his, in films like Scarface, films like Goodfellas and Casino, series like, David Chase's series, The Sopranos. It's easy to see the impact. And as I was explaining to you this morning, think about any mob movie that came out prior to The Godfather in 1972. Maybe White Heat, James Cagney, or maybe Public Enemy, 1931, another Cagney film, or even Edward G. Robinson or some of those guys. But the impact of this movie, man, to me resonates to this day, because every movie that's a mob movie is made is held up against The Godfather. Even today, 50 years later, you can't make a movie without the specter of The Godfather looming over your production, because it's just that good as a family film. And then, as I told Charles, the sequel, which became the first film I could ever remember of having a sequel and a prequel. So we tell the backstory of Vito Corleone coming to America, or let me rephrase that, Vito Andolini from Corleone coming to America. Right. They messing his name up and he suddenly becomes Vito Corleone. How a young Robert De Niro plays him, and then we meet a young Clemenza, and we meet the young what's the other guy's name that Abe Vigoda played before he got killed? Tessio. A young Tessio and Clemenza, along with Vito Corleone in the Genco olive oil business. Whew. Wait, hold on a second. Let me hold this up for people, man, because I just want y'all to understand that the love runs deep for The Godfather. Look at the back. Woo, Michael. So, like I said, man, I thought that number 2, as we watch Michael continue to guide his family in the present day of the story in 1974, and then Vito Corleone's tale of him rising through, Francis Ford Coppola. I think Paramount's big mistake, Charles, I'll say it now, and I've never said this on air. Paramount had 2 tremendous blunders that happened in 1970s, right? He'd already made Godfather 1 and Godfather 2, 72, 74, right? And there might have been an insistence on Coppola's part that he wanted to do something different. He didn't want to be George Lucas. George Lucas made Star Wars, The New Hope, and then 4 years later, was it Return of the Jedi? Was that the second one?
No, The Empire Strikes Back.
The Empire Strikes Back. So he did The New Hope, The Empire Strikes Back, and then in '83 did Return of the Jedi, right? So I don't think Francis Ford Coppola had the sensibility that he wanted to keep making Godfather films, right? I think in a way it's bad for people who love the franchise, because I believe if he would have been able to make 3 during the 1970s, I think it's an entirely different conversation that we're having, instead of this 17-year gap between 2 and 3. 3 to me just felt on the surface that it was rushed, right? He started shooting it in March, for people who don't know, and they wanted it for Christmas. And I'm like, dude, it's like 9 months. You want me to tell this epic story in 9 months, right? Or you want me to tell it even before 9 months? Because remember, he probably shot it. It took like maybe 90 to 120 days to shoot it. For people who don't understand how films are made, you got to lock the film, the color. You got to do a bunch of stuff to the movie. You just don't shoot a movie, take it to the editing bay. It's got to be prepped to get out. Then the second problem with that 91 release was that it came down, like they interviewed Robert Duvall. And Robert Duvall didn't come back for the third movie because he said that they offered Al Pacino not 2 times more than him. He said he could have done it. He could have taken it if it was only 2 times more. But he said they offered him 4 times more than they were offering him to be Tom Hagen. So he dipped and didn't come back for the film, and they cast George Hamilton, which I thought was a mistake. Winona Ryder was supposed to have been in the film, and I'm trying to remember what happened to her, but she had to drop out, and Sofia Coppola came in. And I think those 2 things, coupled with the rush nature, and then in some points a lot of redundancy in 3 as well, with the final arc, I think somewhat hurt this movie. I also know that Francis Ford Coppola wanted the film to be called Godfather 3, The Death of Michael Corleone, and the studios was like, oh no, not doing that, because we want to make some more money with this with this Corleone family. So they didn't want that, despite the fact that he does kill him in the film. And then I thought the other mistake was that they set up Andy Garcia perfectly to take over as the new Don, and they never made another movie. So it feels like to me that it's a combination of Francis Ford Coppola having to deal with so much stuff with the studio. Like the studio I never feel, from what I've read, Charles, that he had free reign. Like, I've given you 2 classics. So think about it in the terms of being a recording artist, right? I'm Stevie Wonder. I've given you Songs in the Key of Life. I've given you Inner Visions, and I'm coming back to do my next album, and you still meddling in, telling me what I can do, what I can't do. And I think too much of that interference from the studio level is what detracts from what should be the greatest franchise in Hollywood history. It still arguably is, with being the only one that has 2 Best Picture wins in it. But Charles, there was so much more that could have been done with this franchise. So much more.
I think the whole 13-year hiatus that they took 17, year hiatus that they took in making the third movie was really the problem. I think if they had kept the momentum going and had created the third film 2 years after the end of the second film, that they would have been able to keep the same momentum, the same fire going that they had in the other 2 movies to produce something that was, and again, so it comes down to the studio not appreciating what they had, or investing in what they had. But even to this time, there was no precedent for a trilogy of movies like this. I mean, you talked about Star Wars, that came almost 10 years later, if you think about it. In its trilogy, I mean, Star Wars wasn't even conceived at the time that The Godfather was. So there was no precedent for how to do this kind of thing. So, we can say, oh, the studio's at fault, but they just didn't know how to handle it. This was new territory that they were going into. So as we've gotten further on into it, studios have have learned from the process that the Godfather went through, and they've improved upon it so that they can produce a trilogy better than what they did with the Godfather. Two great movies, but so much hope could have been there for the third, even to the point where they're remixing the third movie to try to make it better. But it is what it is, and yeah.
Yeah, I just watched that about a year or so ago. I reviewed that, man. The kind of the remix of Godfather 3. So I'll just wrap this up with this, man. Gangsters reportedly responded enthusiastically to the film. Salvatore Sammy the Bull Gravano, the former underboss in the Gambino crime family, said, "I left the movie stunned. I mean, I floated out of the theater. Maybe it was fiction, but for me, that was our life. It was incredible. I remember talking to a multitude of guys, made guys who felt exactly the same way." According to Anthony Fianto, after seeing the film, the Patriciarca crime family members, Paulie and Fizzo and Nikki Giso, altered their speech patterns to imitate that of Vito Corleone. They said he was also known to swear frequently and use poor grammar, but after seeing The Godfather, he began to improve his speech and philosophize more. So yes, there's a lot and again, as a black man, and we are being black men, remember 30 years ago when Boys in the Hood and New Jack City and these sorts of films came out, and then Hollywood wanted to make every film of Boys in the Hood. So whether it was Menace to Society, South Central, all these different films that came out after that, it was the same thing that everybody wanted to have a knockoff kind of Italian gangster Godfather-ish sort of a film. So a lot of Italian Americans, man, do not feel like celebrating the 50th anniversary of The Godfather because they're like, yo, man, that's hood, man. That's negative. You don't want that. And I get it. But I'm sorry, Francis Ford Coppola, being of Italian descent, was able to do something that will outlive him. Like long after Francis Ford Coppola is gone, The Godfather will be celebrating his anniversary, the 75th anniversary, the 100th anniversary of The Godfather, which doesn't happen a lot for films, man. Nobody's running around celebrating. Well, let me take that back. There's only 2 films that I know of, Charles, that get celebrated in this way, right? I think several years ago, I think 5 years ago, because now it's like now the 81st anniversary of Citizen Kane, because it came out in 1941. So they had the 75th anniversary 6 years ago or 5 years ago. The 50th anniversary of The Godfather, but I don't know of too many other films, man, where people are like, "Hey, man, it's the 35th anniversary of whatever Pia Zadora's movie was." It just doesn't happen a lot.
There are some out there. I mean, people celebrate The Wizard of Oz. There are a few of them out there.
There's a few, but there's not a lot of films that are celebrated in lore. And Wizard of Oz, I don't know. When's the last time you seen a Wizard of Oz?
Thanksgiving.
Damn, you better than me. All right. Yeah, the Wizard of Oz. There's not a lot of movies, but yes, but I salute to Francis Ford Coppola. Salute to that amazing cast. I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about the movie. I wanted to talk about the impact of the film, which I think we've actually done. Marlon Brando, of course, went on to win the Oscar and famously did not show up to the ceremony. Yeah. And he sent a representative from the Native American community, which I thought was mad cool. So, yeah, man, it's a classic film, man. So if you get an opportunity this weekend, I would honestly tell you that if you could find it on the big screen anyway, you should check it out. It is just a masterclass in movie making. There are no scenes that don't work. The flow of the film, the cut, the color, the sound, the look, the language, everything about this film to me is just sheer perfection. It just really is. If I had to review that movie and write a review today, they'd be like, "Tim, I only need 500 to 600 words, and I'll be like, I know I'm at 1,400 words, but I'm still going. There's so much to say. So many great characters.
So many layers.
I hope your first child is a masculine child. I can do this all day. All right, Charles. So we out of here, man. Let us get out of here. I want you guys to enjoy your Oscar weekend. Charles, can you give the plug one more time for people who may want to come to the Arlington Cinema and Draft House and watch me drone on at the 94th Annual Academy Awards?
Again, Oscars party, Arlington Cinema and Draft House, and doors open at 6:30. It's $20 to get in. Once you get in, you can eat, you can drink, you can play games with the trivia. We can get swag bags. We got all kinds of merchandise that we'll be giving out. There's a silent auction for items. Predict the winners contest, all the good stuff. And like I said, Tim and Travis are going to be hosting, so it's always a lot of fun. And just to hang out and watch films and laugh and make fun.
All right, so I'm going to sit down so you can see my backdrop is The Godfather at 50. Episode 496 is a wrap. As we tell you all the time, please see something good at the movies. Until next time, you guys enjoy. Look, Charles. Oh, you like that? You like that? Godfather at 50.